Listen to this. I just can't wrap my head around the fact that he actually pulled it off. Now that is 18 syllables uttered at a relatively fast speed. How did I manage to do that? Well, first off, I've been speaking English for many, many years. So, practice makes perfect, blah, blah, blah. But there is a method to this madness, as it were. So how can you get to that point where you actually deliver that and you blurt it out, it flows out of you like that? You should probably take it step by step. The secret is what textbooks and teachers call connected speech, which basically is your ability to transition across word boundaries. That is to say, you can pronounce the clusters, the consonant clusters, the sequences that go between words. How do you join words together? And I have good news for you. I mean, sometimes you do that, maybe you don't realize that, but sometimes you just deliver sequences. Like, for example, how are you? How are you is 3 syllables. Do you really have to think about the grammar? No. The vocabulary? Certainly not. Okay. Now, do you pay attention to the sequences, to how you smoothly transition from how are you, how are you? Probably you don't give it a second thought. You just say it like that. Well, that is what we call a chunk. Okay. A chunk is a sequence of words that come out as a whole unit. So that they pose no, typical questions like, what is the preposition that I need? What is the verb noun combination? When you say, but by the time you hit the ground, you're dead. Whatever, sorry about them. Hit the ground. You hit the ground, you coin a word, you request a refund. Those combinations, they're called collocations. We have to assume that you know them. So, you might hesitate sometimes to say, it was awkward. We didn't know that Jean was going to show up, turn up. She was going to show, she was going to come, she was going to arrive. I don't know. You might be entitled to, certain degree of uncertainty there. What do I say? But when it comes to things like apply for a job, plant a tree, you don't have much of a choice. You have to say plant a tree. Now, when you know that, now you don't waste time thinking what is the right term. So you can focus on the pronunciation. And then you say, all right, plant a tree, plant a tree, plant a. That is the transition I'm talking about. Now that is obviously quite easy to pronounce, to articulate, but in sequences like the one that I used at the beginning of the clip, well, it's not so obvious because there are lots of processes going on. It's really, really complex. So let's analyze that one, and I'll give you some practice, so you can start feeling more self-confident, all right? Now, I just can't wrap my head around, okay, pay attention. I do not pronounce the T. I don't say I just can't. I don't pronounce that second T either. I say I just can't. I use the glottal stop, okay, that catch in the throat, when you cut off the air stream in your mouth, and you go like, for example, when you say, that is a glottal stop right there. When you say, that is, so you say, what? It's like say, what the hell is going on? What the, which is the same sequence you use when you say, I don't know what the problem is. What the? You clearly don't say what the. You see the difference between what the and what the, all right? So I just can't, okay, wrap my head. Do you hear the P? You don't, because I don't pronounce it. I say wrap my, you have what we call homorganic sounds. 2 sounds that are produced in the same spot in your oral cavity. Now, one of them goes, you don't pronounce both. Like when you say international, you don't say international sometimes in the American dialect. So that happens in colloquial speech very often because it speeds up your speech when you say, what the, or sorry, rapma. So you pronounce the M, but not the P, right? They are both bilabial. Wrap my head around. That is pretty straightforward. Head around. Okay. Around the fact, not so obvious. Around the. Evidently, you do not pronounce around and then the interdental. You say around the. So what you do is forget about the interdental. You don't put your tongue between your teeth, but you do slide your tongue slightly over the alveolar area. The tongue stops behind your upper teeth to the point where you say duh, duh. So not the, not duh, duh, it's duh. I just can wrap my head around the, around the. That's the sequence, all right? The transition. The fact, again, I don't pronounce the T here either. I say around the fact, and I pronounce the same D again. Daddy, daddy, that is the sequence, daddy, and then actually pulled it off. I want to think that final sequence, did off, is the name of a Russian composer. Have you heard the last symphony, the second symphony by Didov? If you think about it that way, you don't picture the three elements. Pulled it off. Think of the sequence, did off. So I just can't wrap my head around the fact that he actually pulled it off. Lots of little things done well, that's the recipe for success. I encourage you to practice with long sequences like these two that I'm going to give you. Listen carefully. Okay, I can't begin to imagine what it must have been like to be a woman in the Middle Ages. You see, you could start by practicing must have been like, what it must have been like. You can say, I just can't imagine, or I can think, or I can begin to imagine. There are lots of variations on the expression, but must have been like to me is the key. What it must have been like. Because if you say must have been, you don't have to think, okay, I'm talking about the past, I'm speculating, so I need to use the modal verb with the have. All that grammar stuff is irrelevant. It should have been integrated into your system by now, all right? That's when you can focus on the delivery, all right? What it must have been like to be a woman in the Middle Ages. Okay, and finally, another one, which is one that is really close to my heart. I like this, the idea that you can think beyond yourself, For instance, if I say, he's not planting trees, the shade of which he won't sit under, he's not planting trees, the shade of which he won't sit under. Those long sentences rely on your ability to transition from word to word. Happy practice.